Next day, the Fat Controller arrived.
I would like you to go to the harbour tonight to collect something rather unusual.
What sort of something?
Wait and see.
Percy was moving trucks into a siding. Henry arrived with his goods train. The signalman switched the points and Percy waited on the siding until Henry had steamed by. Then there was trouble. "The points are jammed," called the signalman. "I can't switch them back. The workmen will mend them in the morning. It's too late now." Said Percy's driver. "I'm sorry, Percy, but you will have to stay here for the night." "Where are you going?" asked Percy.
Home for tea, replied the fireman.
Percy was speechless. He watched as the other engines went home to the shed. Night time came and Percy began to feel very lonely. "Oh dear," he murmured, "it's very dark." Oh, what's that?" It was only an owl, but Percy didn't realise this. "I wish Thomas was here too," he sighed. Thomas was waiting for his mysterious load at the harbour. Suddenly, there it was. "Cinders and ashes," cried Thomas. "It's a dragon." "Don't worry," laughed his driver. "This dragon is made of paper. It's for the carnival tomorrow." Workmen lifted the dragon onto Thomas's low loader and put lights all around it for protection. Then Thomas set off into the misty night. Percy was asleep in his sidings and had no idea that Thomas was approaching him. "Help!" cried Percy. "I'm not going to open my eyes until my driver comes." Next morning, the points were mended and Percy puffed back to the junction. Gordon was just about to leave with the express. "You'll never guess what I saw last night." Gordon was in no mood for puzzles. "I'm a busy engine. I don't have time for your games." "I've seen a huge dragon. It was covered in lights." Gordon snorted. "You've been in the sun too long. Your dome has cracked." Later, he was still boasting. "I'm the pride of the line."
I saw you pulling trucks today. You're only a goods engine, snorted Gordon.
James was furious. "I pull coaches too."
Not as much as I do, grunted Gordon.
"The Fat Controller has plans for me." James was only making this up, but Gordon believed him.
What plans?
Wait and see. "Oh dear," thought James, "now what'll I do?" Thomas was shunting shining new coaches. "Good morning, James." "Are those coaches for me?" asked James hopefully. "No, these are for Gordon's Express. I'll fetch your trucks next." But James was going to play a trick on the other engines. "Actually, Thomas, I'm taking the coaches. The Fat Controller asked me to tell you." "What about the trucks?" Give them to Gordon." "Come on, Thomas," said his driver. "Orders are orders." So when James's driver returned, James was coupled to the coaches and he puffed away. Thomas returned with the trucks. A few minutes later, Gordon arrived. "Where's the express?" Thomas told him about James, and so here are your trucks. Gordon was very cross, and so was his driver. "Wait till the Fat Controller hears about this." Meanwhile, James was enjoying himself enormously. "What a clever plan, what a clever plan," he chuffed. Then he saw the Fat Controller.
Some jokes are funny, but not this one, James. You have caused confusion.
"Yes, sir." said James.
You will stay in your shed until you are wanted.
The other engines teased James. I wonder who'll be pulling the express today, said Gordon. I expect it'll be you, replied Henry. James is stuck in the shed for being silly. James felt sad. Next morning, he went back to work. Hello, whistled Thomas. Good to see you out and about again. I'm sorry I tricked you, said James. Are these my trucks? Yes, replied Thomas kindly. They are pleased to have you back. James puffed into the harbour with his goods train of trucks. One night, Percy was waiting at the junction. The main line train was late. At last, Henry arrived. Sorry, he puffed. The mail boat from the mainland was delayed. Come on, Percy, said his driver. Let's make up for lost time. Percy puffed along as quickly as he could, but the sun was already rising as he finished his work. Never mind, thought Percy. It's nice to be up and about when it's the start of a new day and there's no one else around. Percy was not alone for long. Bother, said Percy. It's that dizzy thing, Harold. Good morning, whirred Harold. I always said railways were out of date, but you're so slow with the post, you should give everyone their stamps back. Post haste. Percy was too tired to explain. Bird brain, he muttered. Good morning, Percy, called Duck. You're up early. No, you're wrong, sighed Percy. I'm back, tired and late. He rolled into the shed and fell asleep almost before his buffers touched the bar. His driver decided to set off early that evening. Thomas was waiting at the station. Thank goodness I've a chance to speak to you. Driver said that the person in charge of the post has complained to the Fat Controller about the delay last night. But that wasn't my fault, replied Percy. I know, said Thomas, and so does the Fat Controller, but this post person wouldn't listen. Tonight we'll just have to be quicker than ever before. The engines were just leaving the station when they heard a familiar buzzing. I say, you two, there's news flying about. Where? Puffed Percy. All over the place. They're going to scrap the post train and use me instead. Wings work wonders, you know, always. Rubbish, huffed Thomas. That night, everything ran like clockwork. Thomas and Percy steamed through the stations, making good time everywhere they went. At a station, Thomas noticed a man looking cold and worried. He had missed his train home. We can give you a ride, said Thomas's driver, but it will be rather uncomfortable. Thank you, said the man. Anything's better than sitting here. Bad luck, Bertie, said Thomas. Now, if you were a steam engine, you would run on a pair of reliable rails. Huh, replied Bertie. The railway was supposed to deliver tar to mend the road 2 weeks ago. You can't trust a thing that runs on rails. I run on rails. You can trust me, Bertie. I'll see if I can find out what's happened. Thomas left Bertie and made his way along the branch line towards the big station by the sea. James was snorting about in the yard. It's too bad. Percy goes to work at the harbour and I do his job here, there and everywhere. Take that. Ooh, groaned the trucks. Just you wait, we'll show you. Gordon laughed. I'll tell you what, James, if you pretended to be ill everywhere, you couldn't shunt trucks here or go to the quarry there, could you? What a good idea, agreed James. Look, here comes Thomas. I'll start pretending now. Thomas was sorry to see the engines looking miserable. Cheer up, it's a beautiful day. Yes, grumbled Gordon, but not for James. What's the matter? He's sick, replied Gordon. Yes, he is. I am, stuttered James. I don't feel well at all. "Don't worry," said Thomas kindly. "I'll help out if you're ill." Gordon and James sniggered quietly to each other. Some of James's trucks were coupled behind Thomas, and he steamed away to the quarry. The trucks were still cross. "We couldn't pay James back for bumping us, so we'll play tricks on Thomas instead. One engine is as good as another." But Thomas didn't hear them. He collected all the stone from the quarry and then set off back to the junction. Danger lay ahead. "Now for our plan," giggled the trucks. "Go faster, go faster." "Slow down," called Thomas's driver and applied the brakes. Poor Thomas stood dazed and surprised in a muddy pond as a toad eyed him suspiciously. "Bust my buffers," muttered Thomas. The day started so well, too. Duck pulled away the trucks, and Edward helped Thomas back to the junction. Suddenly, Thomas remembered about the missing tar. He told Edward all about it. "That's strange," said Edward. "A truck full of tar has been left at my station. That must be it. Driver will make sure it gets to Bertie now." Toby's line crosses with the main road behind the station and for a short way follows a farm lane. Frosty weather makes the muddy lane rock hard and very slippery. Toby stops before reaching the lane. His fireman halts the traffic at the crossing and then he sets off again. By using the heavy trucks to push him along, he has no trouble with the frosty rails in the lane. It is the only safe thing to do in this kind of weather. Toby warned Mavis and told her just what to do. "I can manage, thank you," she replied. "I'm not an old fusspot like you." The trucks were tired of being pushed around by Mavis. "It's slippery," they whispered. "Let's push her around instead." "On, on," they yelled. Mavis took no notice. Instead, she brought the trucks carefully down the lane and stopped at the level crossing. All traffic halted. "One in the headlamp for Fusspot Toby," chortled Mavis. But Mavis had stopped in the wrong place. Instead of taking Toby's advice, she had given the trucks the chance they wanted. Hold back, they cried. "Grrr, up," ordered Mavis. The trucks just laughed and her wheels spun helplessly. Workmen sanded the rails and tried to dig away the frozen mud, but it was no good. Everyone was impatient. "Grrr, ah!" wailed Mavis. Toby was in the yard when he heard the news. "I warned her," he fumed. "She's young yet," soothed his driver, "and—" "She can manage her trucks herself," interrupted Toby. "They're your trucks, really," his driver replied. "Mavis is supposed to stay at the quarry if the Fat Controller finds out." Yes," said Toby thoughtfully. He and his driver agreed that it would be best to help Mavis after all. An angry farmer was telling Mavis just what she could do with her train. "Having trouble, Mavis?" chortled Toby. "I am surprised." "Gosh," said Mavis. With much puffing and wheel slip, Toby pushed Mavis and the trucks back. The hard work made his fire burn fiercely, and his firemen spread hot cinders to melt the frozen mud. The siding arrangements were awkward. To put the trucks where Toby wanted them, Mavis had to make several journeys. She started making a plan. "If we use the teeniest bit of Toby's line, we would save all this bother,"
Her driver, suspecting nothing, allowed them to go as far as the first level crossing. A few days later, the weather changed. As the snow melted, the quarry grew busy again. Some trains were so long that Mavis had to go beyond the level crossing. Now for her plan. She would go further down the line without it seeming her fault. "Can you keep a secret?" she asked the trucks. "Yes, yes, yes," they chattered. "Will you bump me at the level crossing and tell no one I asked you?" The trucks promised. But whilst Mavis was away, Toby arrived. He decided to shunt the trucks himself. The trucks decided to bump him anyway. They reached the level crossing and Toby's brakes came on. This was the signal for the trucks. "On, on," they yelled. Toby was away with the trucks screaming and yelling behind him. No one realised that melted snow had turned a stream into a torrent and the bridge above it was about to collapse. The rails were now like a tightrope across the thundering water. "Stop! Stop!" cried Toby. His driver fought for control. They came nearer and nearer to the bridge. The driver braked hard. Toby stopped, still on the rails, but with his wheels treading the tightrope over the abyss. Mavis was horrified and quickly came to the rescue. Workmen anchored Toby with chains while she pulled the trucks away. Then she helped Toby to safety. "I'm sorry about the trucks," said Mavis. "I can't think how you managed to stop them in time." James bustled in.
What's that, Duck? He snorted. Are you afraid of bees? They're only insects after all, so don't let that buzzbox diesel tell you different. His name is Boko, and he didn't I wouldn't care, interrupted James. If hundreds were swarming around, I'd just blow smoke and make them buzz off.
Buzz, 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 retorted Duck.
The next morning, James arrived at the station to collect his coaches. The passengers were excited and keen to get on board. The platform was crowded and the porter was in a hurry. "Mind your backs," he shouted. Then there was trouble. The beehive fell and broke open. The station cleared like magic. James heard a familiar buzzing. The bees were too cold to be cross, so they buzzed around the fireman hoping he'd mend their hive, but he didn't understand, nor did his driver. So the bees turned to James. His boiler was nice and warm. Buzz off, hissed James. One bee burnt his foot. Ooh, ah, phew, phew. The bee thought James had burnt him on purpose. So it stung James right back on the nose. "Eee!" whistled James. He had had enough. So had his fireman and driver. They didn't notice till too late that they had left all their coaches behind. They tried everything to get rid of the bees. First, they spun on the turntable, to no avail. They tried washing them off, but the bees clung harder to James's warm boiler. Then they tried smoking them off by going through a long tunnel. But still the bees wouldn't go away. "It's no good, James," said his driver. "We'll just have to go back to the orchard and fetch another hive." James's reply was drowned by the sound of buzzing. The vicar was waiting anxiously for James. When he arrived, the bees swarmed straight into their new home. "Come on, James," said his driver. "What you need now is a good hose down." Later that evening, James was resting in the shed when the vicar came to see him. "Thank you for saving my bees," he said. "It's a pity it's not Christmas, then we could call you James the Red-Nosed Engine." Everyone laughed, even James, but instead they decided to call James the Bee's Knees, which means they thought he was more useful than ever.
At last the day's work was done. The twins now became excited. They were going to use the turntable for the first time. Bill went first. "This is fun," he shrieked to Ben. He didn't want to move off at all. The foreman stopped the turntable. "Please make way for the other engines," he ordered. Bill did so, but unfortunately the foreman had accidentally stopped the turntable in the wrong place. Bill was on the wrong track and there was Ben puffing directly toward him. The engines came to a grinding halt. They gazed grimly at each other. "I was here first," said Bill. "But you're in my way," protested Ben. "You'll have to back up again." "I won't." "You will." "I won't." The Fat Controller came to stop the noise. "If you don't behave, I shall not allow you here again." The next day, Ben was still grumpy. "That Bill, imagine getting in my way on the turntable. He's a really silly engine." "The way I heard it," sighed Boko, "it sounded like you were both to blame." "Pho! You must have heard it all wrong." The twins grumbled about each other all day. Even kind Edward lost patience. "All this grumbling spreads bad atmosphere in the yard." "You're quite right, and that's why I've come up with a plan." Boko whispered his plan to Edward. Then his driver told the Fat Controller. "I'll start making arrangements straight away." The next morning he called Bill and Ben into the yard. "Boko is taking a special train to the harbour. His regular heavy goods train is waiting on the siding. You can pull it together." But, protested Bill and Ben, who were still not speaking to each other. "Good, I knew I could rely on you two." "I'll take the train myself," huffed Ben. "Go right ahead," said Bill. Ben was coupled up to the train of trucks, but they were too heavy for him to move alone. "Go on," teased Bill. "I can't," said Ben. Then suddenly both twins laughed. "I don't think we'll take turns this time, Ben," said Bill. "I think we'd better pull together." Ben was delighted. It was good to be helping each other. Best of all, it was good to be friends again. He was just shunting, ready for his return journey, when... "That sounds like a steam engine," he thought. The hiss came again. "Who's there?" asked Douglas. A whisper came. "Are you a Fat Controller's engine?" "I improved it." "Thank goodness. I'm Oliver, and I'm with my brake van Toad. We've run out of coal and have no more steam." "But what are you doing?" "Escaping." "From what?" "Scrap." Douglas shivered. Then he remembered Edward's story about saving Trevor. "I'll be glad to help you," he said. "It'll have to look as if you're ready for scrap, and I'm taking you away." The drivers and firemen agreed to help too. Everyone worked fast. "No time to turn around," panted Douglas. "I'll run tender first. Come on." But before they could clear the station, they were stopped. "Aha!" exclaimed the foreman. "A Great Western engine and a brake van too. You can't take these." "Ah, but they're all for us," said Douglas's driver. "See for yourself." The foreman looked all over Oliver. "Seems in order. Right, away, guard." "That was a neat thing," puffed Douglas. "We've had worse," smiled Oliver. And they forged ahead. It was daylight when their journey ended. "We're home," cried Douglas. "Shh," said his driver. "There are the works. We'll find a place for Oliver." Oliver said goodbye and thank you, and Douglas puffed away. The next day, Douglas told the other engines all about Oliver. "The Fat Controller will have to know," said James. "Douglas should tell him at once," added Gordon. "Well, here he is," said a voice. "Now, what's this all about?" "Beg pardon, sir, but we do need another engine." "Yes, sir," ventured Gordon. "A steam engine, sir." "I'm afraid that unless one is saved from scrap, there's little hope." "But, sir," burst out Douglas, "one has." "Yes, indeed, and thanks to you, Douglas, he is now at our works. Oliver is just what we need for Duck's branch line. Trucks." The other engines warned Oliver, but he took no notice. "You think I can't manage?" he said huffily. "Gordon knows better. He says I'm sagacious." "You may be good gracious, or whatever you call it, but trucks can be troublesome and—" "Say no more, Duck," interrupted Donald. "It's maybe a pity, but the wee engine'll have to learn for himself." Oliver pulled some loaded trucks to a siding and pushed the empties to the chute. Then he came back to take the loaded trucks away. They were comfortable and didn't want to move. "What right has he to poke his funnel in here?" they grumbled. "We want Duck, or Donald, or Douglas." "Look sharp," puffed Oliver. "That's not the way to speak," hissed the trucks. "We'll pay him out." Oliver heard nothing. The trucks moved smoothly at first, then suddenly Oliver felt them push forward. His driver applied the brakes, but they were useless against the surging trucks. "On, on, on!" yelled the trucks. Oliver fought hard, but still they forced him on and on. At last the trucks grew tired. "I'm winning," gasped Oliver. But it was too late. Oliver lay, bruised and bemused, bunkered down in the turntable well. Duck surveyed the damage. "Hello, Oliver. Are you being a good gracious engine? Beg pardon, of course, but we really don't like this sort of surprise. Donald and Douglas will miss their turntable until it is mended." That evening, Oliver was hauled gently to safety. "I'm sorry, sir," he said to the Fat Controller. "I should have listened to Duck's advice. I don't feel good gracious, whatever it is. I just feel silly." "Well, Oliver," replied the Fat Controller, "now you know the damage trucks can do." "Yes, I do, sir," groaned Oliver. "I look like a load of scrap iron."
"Ho, ho. Oh, I don't think so," laughed the Fat Controller. "But you do need to go to the works to be mended."
The other engines now felt sorry for Oliver. "The branch line won't be the same without you," whistled Duck. "Come back soon." A few days later, Oliver did come back. His coat gleamed brighter than ever. He was a wiser engine, too, and never made a mistake about trucks again.